land was purchased,
John, who's DAW?
I don't know, it's a logging company, I don't know what the acronym stands for. But they were active and they had logged this much in the same way that the land was logged on the Locksaw Exchange checkerboard stuff. And Potlatch Corporation bought this with the idea of exchanging this land for this land. Now there wasn't enough standing sawlog volume up here to get the whole 16,000 acres. This was 28,000 acres, this is 16,000 acres, but there wasn't enough sawlog volume, so they only got about 14,200 and some acres in that exchange, and then there were preceding exchanges that following exchanges that acquired the whole 16,000 acres. What has been done on these lands since they've been acquired by the Forest Service, as near as I can figure, the predominant work has been to remove roads. And
So is there any trees on those parcels now?
well, there's something like 95 million board feet of timber was cruised, and that was cruised into 14,300 some acres down here for the exchange to make it equal value for equal value. And you have to see the appraisal, Kathy, to understand what equal value dollar for dollar means. For instance, down here we had roads that were beautifully designed and engineered, often rock. The land was accessible by a asphalt road, as you know.
Right.
And there was millions of dollars invested in burning the slash after an area was logged, in planting to conifers, in thinning those, in pruning, and sometimes in gopher control. So you had a huge investment by the Forest Service for the public in these lands down here.
So that was all invested with taxpayer money.
Right, that was invested
So-
with taxpayer money. So when the appraisal comes along, the Forest Service always says an independent appraiser will determine the value. Well, what is given the independent appraiser is the sawlog volume. So if these plantations and all the money invested in this area was not cruisable sawlog volume, you got raw land value for it.
So basically, we had a Cadillac here, invested for the public, and we traded for a Volkswagen.
Yes, but it wasn't that of course, it wasn't seen by the public that way. I like to use an analogy that you go to an appraiser who appraises, and you say, you've got two rings. One, both got gold. This one on the backside has a diamond. You go to an appraiser and you say, please appraise the gold in here. He doesn't know about the diamond here. Only the information that you give the appraiser is what he bases the independent appraisal on. So the only information that appeared in this unit and in the McGarry-Johnson exchange that was on the Palouse, the only information is sawlog volume, what kind of yarding system is needed to yard that to a landing, how far to the nearest mill, and raw land value. That's what the appraisal, that's what the public has been duped into thinking is dollar for dollar, value for value, which is the very start of the Upper Locksaw Exchange. That's what.
So at the Upper
Supervisor Ryan.
Locksaw Exchange, all that land up there has been clear cut, and the only trees still standing for the most part are just the buffer zones along the creeks.
Well,
Will
no,
those be counted as sawlog?
no, yes, I don't know. I don't believe, I can't say for certain whether they would be counted as solid volume, but in some photos that we can look at later on of this country, there's some of it that was so high and rugged that building roads to access it, get out the timber, just didn't pay. In other words, Plum Creek, when they owned this, they made sure that they took the stuff that was economically feasible to get, plus leaving a few stems per acre, maybe 5,000 board feet per acre, to help regenerate the stand. Often, the stand that was regenerated was underneath a cumulative amount of slash.
So with all that slash, if lightning hit that slash, it will just burn up all those new trees, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So the public will end up with nothing,
And
but bare ground.
well, in many cases, that's what's been described as a public, that the Forest Service wants to manage these areas for, is to let fire play its role. So, in other words, we're managing the landscape.
Won't that cause like extreme amounts of pollutants into the air and stuff if that all
Well,
starts to burn?
Well, sure, and it will, but, you know, it's out of sight, out of mind. And here's the other thing about this, that why I feel this area and this area are important to, for the Forest Service to get a hold of and fit right in with our politicians' desire to appease the timber industry and get money for their campaigns and this kind of thing. I think it fits right in. I don't know how many people are familiar with this, Kathy, but it was something that we picked up from a concerned public that shows something the UN and the US has put together. I don't want to go into detail because I don't know that much about it, but essentially these are wildlife corridors that extend from Yellowstone, over here, this Yellowstone National Park, up to the Canadian line and on down to Mexico. And there are several things that seems to fit in with this pattern of desiring to acquire these lands while giving out lands on the Palouse and the western side of the old St. Joe, giving those up in exchange to make this wildlife corridor a reality. Here's a thought on this. Down here, this is the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness Area, an arm of it that comes up here. Below that is the Frank Church River Mill Return, an extensive wilderness area.
Right.
If these lands were acquired and the roads were closed, you would have a continuation of that roadless area to the Great Burn area. And this is one that the people have been trying to get, the environmentalists have been trying to get for quite a while, declared wilderness. Then you go up to this checkerboard stuff in which the Clearwater has done nothing to dispose of 3,000 acres of slash that was there, that area that needed to be replanted. They've hauled no timber, had no timber sales up there. You could go from that to the Pioneer area on the St. Joe, Old St. Mary's District, Old St. Joe National Forest, and you go on up. Now, in the spring of 2009, there was 111,000 acres of checkerboard lands on the Montana side of this line that was purchased from Plum Creek by the Nature Conservancy for about $225 million. Much of it was cut over land.
So how did Plum Creek acquire this land?
This land here was acquired as railroads were being built through the Midwest, and Congress had determined that for every mile of railroad that was built, a section of land would be given to the timber, to the railroad companies, and they decided as they went through the Plain States, the way I understand it, why do we want a section of land here when we can get a section of land anywhere? So they came out and picked up these lands. So up north, when you get on the St. Joe to Milwaukee, the old Milwaukee Railroad owned the checkerboard stuff. And then these lands, you know, are sold and timber companies and back and forth and this kind of stuff until finally Plum Creek acquired this land, DAW acquired that land, Potlatch acquired some lands up here, and in the early 1990s, there was a lot of this land being bought by different outfits. And I think now, I can't confirm this of course, that when Potlatch was able to exchange that land for this land down here, this solid, beautiful, managed land with lots of timber and lots of multiple use, and an hour from Orfino on an asphalt road. When they saw that, these things started being snatched up by different people whose is so intertwined I can't tell you who was really buying the land, what entity.
Right.
But I do know that there's a very large, that Potlatch Corporation has become a real estate investment trust, and that they've acquired a lot of land in northern Idaho, as you can see on the map. And of course they acquired this land down here for this land up here, and now there's a connection between this and the current Upper Lochsaw Land Exchange. As far as I'm concerned, that's very
This land exchange looks very similar to the Beaver Cedar Land Exchange, which the public ended up with basically land that's of no value because it's not multi-purpose use.
well. It's not like lands for like lands, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah.
And it's far from the population center, and it fits into this wildlife corridor business that shows here. When the public, the general public, has no conception of this, but if you talk to folks in the Forest Service that are in much higher positions than I ever attained, or many of the people working on district level don't know about, you talk to those folks, they know about it, but it's not
Yeah.
public. It's not public. So, but
Isn't
but
that
here,
something they should be telling the public, because the public pays the Forest Service's wages. All the employees are paid for by the public.
well, of course, but
And the public owns the land.
yeah, the public should be involved in all of this stuff from the very beginning. It kind of anyway. That's kind of a preview of going into the Upper Lochsaw Exchange and looking at that in some detail. But you have to look back to see what happened on these exchanges. Now, this is an interesting thing here, and I think it's reflected in the selection of lands on the Palouse district, is reflected by this and a letter that I have in my files from a fellow by the name of Jerry, I can't remember Jerry's last name, Branning, Jerry Branning. I think he lives in Orfino. And this letter was written in 1993 when this exchange was taking place. And he says, a good example of my concern and a rather ironic feature of this proposal is exemplified by sections 10 and 14 of Township 40 North 1 East,